Hey everyone, welcome back to Enraged Entertainment, where I do all sorts of reviews, content, and the like. Today I will be reviewing the 15th album from American pop rock band Weezer, affectionately titled Van Weezer. Now, this album came out about I want to say 5 months ago, in May 9th, I think it was. But over that period of time, I've been able to kind of formulate and gather my own thoughts and opinions about the album, so I think it's better that I do it now. It's sort of a retrospective. So this album was originally created as sort of an ode to 80s rock, like Motley Crue and Van Halen, which is kind of what the title's from. And also to a return to form from the 90s. And it's incredibly different from their previous album earlier in the year, OK Human, which is much more orchestral and lush. So a more interesting thing I think about Weezer's discography is that they've always been, in the later portion of their careers, more criticized for the overproduced poppy feels. Their album on efforts such as Make Believe, Teal, Black, Pacific Daydream, how they kind of are distanced from their rock origins and are much more, how do I put this, more artificial sounding, I guess. And while that does have somewhat of a play in Van Weezer, it's also, it harkens much back to its prior roots and kind of does a great mesh of the two. So the first track in this whole thing, well, it matters what streaming service you're on, but I use Apple Music, so is for me The End of the Game, which I gotta say, right up, it's definitely my favorite track. It has the most lively and electric guitar solo like I've heard from the band in a long time. Sure, the story is kind of a generic love song from Rivers, which is very stereotypical of the band, but compared to earlier stuff, it's much more, there's a lot of cool like name drops, well, not cool, but like strange name drops that kind of make it more quirky and stuff. And overall, it's a very good time of a song. Like, there's a lot of great guitar sounds, great guitar tone, really good drum fills. I just don't really like that hand clap aspect of it. They do a lot of peculiar pops, like trying to get the crowd to sing along. Well, not sing along, but clap along. And it's kind of, it doesn't really work for me because it still harkens back to that pop kind of feel, so I think they should have cut that. But other than that, I think it's a great song, and it's probably my favorite out of the whole thing, just because how energetic it feels. So I'd say it's a 9 out of 10. So next up we have All the Good Ones, which is described by the fan base as a good Beverly Hills, which I'm gonna have to agree with because it's a very, very simple chord progression, but it's still really nice. I don't know why, it's like the guitar tone's like super tender compared to like other albums, which are just seem more fake. And it's fair. The weird thing about it is in the verses, and other portions of the song, it's incredibly like bass important. Like, you can really hear just the strings. You don't hear any guitar, you don't hear any sort of drums. It's just like spoken part, and it is another love song, but you're gonna have a lot of those. So I think it's really adept at just perfecting that pop rock vibe, and it's another decent addition. It's not as great, and it's also, it kind of lacks in any sort of bridge or kind of electric thing that made The End of the Game so great. But it's still a nice addition to the album, even if it could have added some more slack or fat to the song itself. Next we have Hero, which is one of the first songs that released actually right before the pandemic, the second song after The End of the Game that was released as a single. So this song has grown to me very much from when I first heard it on the radio to now. It has a lot of details about the myths of superheroes and legends and how we relate to them today, and it also explains River's isolation through means of being an anti-hero and sort of an outcast. It's very similar to the first song, which has more so empty verses, but very anthemic choruses and bridges, and it's going to be a big crowd pleaser. And even if it isn't, the most dynamic song, it's still going to be a great big one to have in their catalog. So I give it an 8 out of 10. I Need Some of That is the name of their next one, which is a tribute to their late friend Rick Ocasek, who did 3 albums for them, produced them actually. This song is very unlike the other songs and feels very sugary in its production. It almost reminded me of efforts like Gratitude, but like he wrote, it's grown on me a lot. It has very considered childish lyrics, but it also speaks to the period that Rivers did the album as a homage to, kind of indulging in some bittersweet nostalgia. It's very, young in that sort of sense, but it's not like indignation. It's just, very sweet and overall just a good dedication to that point in his life, his childhood, where you were listening to all these bands and it just felt like such an interesting period of nostalgia. So I'd probably give it 7.5 out of 10. Reaching the midway point of the album, we look into that Van Weezer uses a lot of demos from previous records, including Everything Will Be Alright in the End, a 2014 album, which was kind of a return to form in a sense. So it utilizes 2 songs from that. They're called Cockroach and Volunteers, for a song called Beginning of the End, which was actually somewhat used as sort of a special edition for Bill and Ted 3, which is very funny. I think I didn't even recognize it in the movie. But they changed it up for the album version, and I gotta say I enjoy the Bill and Ted version a tiny bit more because I like the bridge a lot more in that one, and this one feels a little bit more like they do like this weird siren sound effect, and they add things that don't need to be there and take away things that made it feel much more epic and kind of, like the rock they were trying to make it. But it's still such an amazing song because they didn't take too much, they didn't dilute it too much from its original thing, which is like soaring and like just great instrumentals. And it's really funny because it's just that same classic rock feel. And I know I've said that a lot, but it's just what this whole album's about, and it really summarizes that really well. So I'd give this I'm not gonna put it on the same level as End of the Game, but 8.5. The streak of using demos for new songs doesn't stop there, as we continue to Blue Dream, which uses another U-Bait demo called Ballad of the Briny, and actually uses a non-Weezer song, Crazy Train, which is very interesting because it's one of the most famous songs out there. So this song feels very aquatic in nature, like the lyrics and the instrumentalization almost make it feel like it's like from a Splatoon game or something. And while the Crazy Train sound, like the iconic riff, feels a little bit jarring, and it can feel like you don't want to hear Crazy Train twice, it's still a great homage to 80s, like what we're trying to do what they're trying to do this whole album. And overall, there's this great guitar solo, which starts off as like kind of a slow shake, but also ends up being exactly like this triumphant finish. And contrary to a lot of the fan base, I just think it's such a good time. Even though it's only 2 minutes around that time, I think it's one of the better tracks on Van Weezer, and for that reason, I'm actually going to give it a 9 out of 10. Now we go down to the hardest hitting song of the whole album. It's called One More Hit, which, can speak to questionable lyrics, like on Gratitude and Red. But this time, it has super spicy chords and like thrash metal sections that just make it sound like a super experimental Weezer song. It sounds so dark, but that's such a great contrast to earlier parts of the album, which sounds so kind of safe, and it sounds like super different and like more edgy, I guess, than other parts of the album. And I really love this dark turn, which is just like, it goes on through a huge thrash section for like thrash section for 20 seconds, and I just really love that ode to experimentalism that they did on this track. So 8.5 out of 10. There's a little bit of a dip in quality of these later tracks and B-sides, starting off with Sheila Can Do It. It's a fine filler, but it lacks enough of zing to come as a reinstatement of tired pop cliches that plague some of their work. There's some rhythm after each chorus, but it still suffers from the background. This is the final and third song to come from a past influence for Rivers. It was a song he created back in 1998, I think it was, with previous bassist Matt Sharp for a side band called Homie, which may explain why it's so jarring as a pop sound, because it was actually originally acoustic. But while it's pleasant and it's inoffensive, it still lacks enough originality to make it a truly remembered Weezer song. I'd say 5.5 out of 10. Here's a one that took me a long time to get the right score for. She Needs Me, probably the sixth song out here. It shares all the same flaws and cons with Sheila, but adds a little bit more flair to the quirks to give it more of a non-filler spot. It has this amazing part after the choruses and the verses, which, you know, are made bearable by the instrumentalization, because the choruses are mostly just 3 words sang over and over again. We lead off to this bridge, which starts in a decrescendo, and by a yell by Cuomo, which starts this amazing cowbell sequence, which actually sounds really funky. And then we have this amazing guitar fill, which finishes throughout the end of the song, which is similar to a lot of the other songs. And it uses its quirks and little nuances relatively well to make it better than some of the previous efforts, which I'd say makes it get better with time. It's a 6.5 out of 10. So as you can probably tell, I've been kind of filming this throughout the night. But yeah, this last portion of this, and yeah, we get this closer, Precious Metal Girl, which is a continuation of the trend for more rock-heavy albums to kind of end, or at least include an acoustic song. For example, Endless Bummer and Butterfly. Even QB Blitz was in Pacific Daydream. So, but this song, it has the same kind of problem as I Need Some of That. It has sort of childish and kind of creepy lyrics at some points, but it still has like a romance side to the 80s, which actually makes it really quality, and the guitar progression is actually really solid, and overall it's more cheesy than creepy, I'd say it is. So it's actually, you know, in that category, it's a win. So honestly, I enjoyed the song a lot more, because it's very tender, it's very, you know, opening, and, you know, it's a great closer to something that kind of, it keeps the same tone throughout, which I really admire because it's so consistent. So 7 out of 10. So looking back on this whole endeavor, I think this is the best option or best timeline for Weezer to go down, where they're still doing light stuff. While it doesn't reach the heights of Blue or White, it still utilizes its, okay, I totally forgot. So throughout this endeavor, I think I've concluded that this is the best option or timeline for Weezer to go down, where they're doing more light stuff. It never reaches the pinnacles of Blue or White, or even the lows, but it still has enough perfection and confidence twisted into the bones, and has so much inspirations from classic rock and 80s rock to make it really a fine import into their catalog. I overall really enjoyed Van Weezer, and would place it between Hurley and Green as their 8th best album. Peace.